Welcome everyone to the pilot episode of the Crease Hockey Podcast. I'm very excited to begin this project. We'll quick start off by doing the same thing that I did last night over on Facebook, where we did like a little Q&A. Except we'll just do an introduction, and then we'll hop into some news, and then I have a couple previews lined up for today. So do a quick little introduction of myself. I am the host. My name is Joey Plishka. I am a 20-year-old college student who will be going into sports journalism. Very excited. It's a career that I really wanted to pursue for a long time. I absolutely fell in love with being able to cover hockey and go in depth on hockey. And kind of fell in love with going over the advanced stats. And once I kind of learned a lot more about those and kind of how all of that worked, I really realized that I had a really big passion for diving deep into kind of what makes teams great, and just a lot more than just the typical hockey fan would see on the surface. Yeah, it was a quick little introduction about myself. What the show is going to look like on a daily basis. I'm going to try to keep it daily as much as possible. My biggest thing is just, we'll kind of start off by doing some news. So similar to how we'll do today, we'll start off with some news. Once games get started tomorrow, since today is currently the eve of the NHL season, we'll do kind of like reviews as well as previews for the next night's game. Occasionally we might throw in some other segments, potentially some other interviews as well, depending on kind of what becomes present. There's not a whole lot to how the show is going to, or nothing really too special for how the show is going to run. Just going to be, news, going over the scores and reviews from the games from the night before, and then as well as jumping into kind of what the games for that day are going to be. Anyways, though, as today, there is a lot of news happening in the NHL. And some of these happening literally right before I hit record. But to start off with just some basic signings, these all happened yesterday, but Mike Hoffman signed a 1-year, $4 million deal to St. Louis. St. Louis is just going to continue to get better now with the addition of Hoffman. He put up 59 points in 69 games last year, so St. Louis is definitely going to be committing to trying to win another championship. And with the addition of Hoffman, I think it's very possible that we do see St. Louis making another deep cup run, especially after their fairly early playoff exit last year. So the addition of Hoffman is going to be a really big boost for St. Louis. Islanders making a couple of their signings. Defenseman Andy Green to a 1-year league minimum $700,000 deal. He's just going to be kind of their go-to either number 6 or even number 7 defenseman as the season goes on. And so, nothing too special there with Andy Green, just, their depth signing that the Islanders have kind of needed on their back end. And then in addition to that too, forward Matt Martin has also signed a 4-year, $6 million deal, so $1.5 million average annual value. And he's just been your typical grinder depth guy. And this contract will most likely probably carry him to kind of towards the end of his career. So a couple good signings there for the Islanders, and of course, guys that were both on their team last year when they made their run all the way to the conference finals. So I think being able to keep those guys around is going to keep the Islanders at least in that position where they will be able to continue to contend for that position. Some news for today as well. The NHL, Gary Bettman has come out and said that they can lose up to $1 billion by playing this season. They would actually lose less if they opted not to play, which I find that very interesting. But it also shows that the NHL is doing this more for the fans and not for owner's sake or for just for finances' sake. So, $1 billion is an absolute lot of money to be losing, especially in these times. But the fact that the NHL is going to be playing is going to be at least something I think all of us can look forward to. And it's, I guess, something that the NHL is definitely okay with working around. So kudos to them for being able to kind of take that jump. And even in a year in a situation like this, I do think that is very important to consider, that the NHL is risking so much by playing this season. So also I want to just kind of quick touch on something that I think we're going to see a lot this season as well, and it's exactly what happened to Corey Perry. Corey Perry got waived yesterday by the Montreal Canadiens, and when a player like Corey Perry even gets waived, even on his deal, which is I believe $750K or $700K, you're seeing a lot of moves just for salary, and that is going to be, I think, a big theme that we end up seeing this season with players who should be, very well capable of playing in the NHL that may end up getting waived or put on the taxi squad that the NHL is implementing for this season, just because guys are just for COVID concerns, obviously, but with the way that this year and the way that this season is going to play out, and the fact that the NHL is going to be running with a flat salary cap for the next couple of seasons, you're going to be seeing a lot of guys, like I said, like Corey Perry's caliber, that are going to end up getting waived. And it has nothing to do with their skill as a player or anything like that. Again, it just comes down to salary. And the biggest news probably from last night that came out, San Jose Sharks, Evander Kane has now filed for bankruptcy. And I'll leave a link to the article that I am pulling this from. But San Jose Sharks left winger has filed for bankruptcy. He has said that he is about $26.8 million in debt. It is worth noting, and just let that sink in itself, at $26.8 million in debt. It is worth noting that Kane has had some issues with gambling. I believe it was a couple seasons ago when San Jose was playing Vegas in the playoffs that Kane got in trouble with the Sharks organization for gambling. And that is something that I think needs to kind of be looked at very seriously now. In the sense that, gambling is an addiction. And I think that's something a lot of people don't kind of realize. And, at least for me, I don't 100% feel qualified to talk on this topic, but it definitely is something to bring up. And even despite the fact that he is that much in debt, he is on a 7-year, $49 million deal that he signed in 2018. So that money very easily could be, used towards paying some of that off. And so why Kane, is considering also not playing, from rumors that I've also heard. It could be a very significant loss for the Sharks. If he's not playing, they rely on him to kind of be a grinder and to a little bit be a goal scorer. And without him, it really kind of puts the Sharks now in a bad spot. And we'll get into what the West Division is going to look like tomorrow. But without Kane, it's going to be a very difficult season for the San Jose Sharks. In terms of other news that just came out today, Blackhawks have extended head coach Jeremy Colleton and added another 2 years, which will bring him out to the end of the 2023 season. Colleton has been a good transition coach so far. I think if he continues to fill that role, then that extension is worth it. It's a pretty short extension for a coach, and that is something that I think that would make the most sense for the Blackhawks. And then Boston Bruins are also making news by announcing that they are going to retire Willie O'Ree's number. The number 22 will be retired in Boston in February, and that is a ceremony that will be looked forward to, and it's very well deserving of Willie O'Ree to have his number retired by the organization. After all, he did play and was most well known for being the first person of color to make it into the NHL, and he played in Boston. So that'll be a great headline once that event happens. But with all of that said, it is time to get into some previews. So 4 divisions this year with the way that the NHL is structured in a 56-game season. The divisions have been realigned, so the North Division, the All-Canadian Division, the East Division, the Central Division, and the West Division. The North Division, as I kind of mentioned, will be all Canadian. So this will be a very tight division, and that is the first one that we're going to dive into. We're going to take a look at the North and also the East today as well. But starting off in the North Division and just kind of where I think each team is going to finish, and starting at the number 1 spot, I believe that the division is going to be taken by the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto has continued to show the last couple seasons that they're only getting better, at least when it comes to their offense. Their playoff struggles are going to be their biggest concern, but for the regular season, I do not see them having much of an issue being able to hang up into, in that top spot and be able to take the number 1 spot. Their strong offense is going to be a really big key for this year, with Marner potentially being in the mix for the Hart Trophy, as people are already predicting. With Frederik Andersen being another consistent goalie, as long as Toronto does not overuse Frederik Andersen in net, I do think Toronto has a pretty decent shot at definitely being able to remain competitive and making sure that Frederik Andersen is not exhausted when going into the playoffs. And if he's not exhausted going into the playoffs, I think that Toronto actually has a really good shot at being able to make some noise in the playoffs this year as well. But of course, the one downside though is for even the veteran moves they made by bringing in Wayne Simmons and Joe Thornton, it still seems like their blue line has remained the same. And as a team that has kind of struggled defensively over the past few seasons, that'll be kind of the interesting thing to watch with Toronto that could potentially hinder them from either holding onto that number 1 spot or could end up coming back to bite them in the playoffs. For number 2, I am predicting that Calgary is going to take the number 2 spot. Adding Markstrom in addition to David Riddick, I think, is a huge addition for Calgary, and it shores up that their net is going to be well tended this year. They're going to have, in a sense, 2 number 1s, so they're going to be able to run a tandem, which means that both goalies are going to split the season most likely. You're not going to see them get overwhelmed, or you're not going to see them tire out or anything like that. So Calgary's goaltending is likely going to be a strong suit for them this season. And then one of the big things, though, to watch out, though, for Calgary is they did lose a couple of defensive pieces, though, in TJ Brody and Travis Hamonic. Without them, it's going to be interesting. They do kind of lose a little bit of that veteran presence on the blue line. But then also, if players like Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau cannot play up to the level that they have been able to play at before, and if they can play up to the MVP style seasons that they have before, I don't expect there to be much of a problem for them. But if Gaudreau and Monahan and Bennett are struggling this season, I could see Calgary having quite a fair bit of issues as well with that. And then coming in at the third place spot, I do have the Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg had a pretty unfortunate loss last year in the play-in round. It was worth noting that they were without a couple of their big key pieces as well. Those players are now going to be back. Mark Scheifele's going to be back. If Patrick Laine can play up to his expectations again, I don't see any reason why the Jets can't make a lot of noise this season. The main problem that I think we're going to see a lot of teams dealing with is the fact that the Canadian division is actually pretty deep. Teams like Winnipeg, Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, a lot of those teams are very, very competitive. It's going to be a very competitive division this year. And if Winnipeg cannot get the defensive help that they needed, for example, the loss of Dustin Byfuglien, although they did play very well without him, I do think that they have good potential if their defense can live up to playing like they did towards the most of the end of last season, even without Dustin Byfuglien. I think that the Winnipeg Jets will be a good team to watch. Coming in at number 4, the Vancouver Canucks. So one of their biggest strengths for this upcoming season is they did add some depth all around. And even now, too, a lot of their younger players are now kind of panning out into the potential that they're able to reach. And as a result, Vancouver is kind of is looking like a very strong team. Their series last year against Vegas was a really good test for them. Markstrom and Thatcher Demko both stood on their heads. With the loss of Markstrom, but the addition of Braden Holtby, if Braden Holtby can get back to his Vezina caliber years as he was in Washington, Vancouver should have a very good season. But again, with with a lot of these signings, it just comes down to how do the new players hold up? Are they going to be able to live up to their expectations? If they're not going to be able to, you're going to probably end up seeing a lot of struggles this year in Vancouver. The number 3, 4, and 5 spots, and even kind of 6, are, I believe, are going to be very intertwined throughout the season. There's going to be a lot of back and forth happening, and I think while these are just my predictions, there's obviously going to be a lot of room just because a lot of these teams are so tight that this division is going to be and could be a very well of division where we see a lot of upsets and a lot of teams where you weren't expecting to make it either are going to be right on the fringe, or teams that we thought would make it probably aren't going to make it. And so if Vancouver's depth can hold up, if they can stay free of injuries, if their new signings can come in and play the way that they have before, I don't see any reason why Vancouver cannot make the playoffs this year. And then coming in at number 5 would be Edmonton. So, in Edmonton, you're going to have the Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl show. That's going to always be around in Edmonton. Just their main concern is just going to be depth this year. If their depth defense can't do it, if their depth offense can't do it, because, outside of McDavid and Draisaitl, it seems like they do not get a lot of scoring. So if their depth can show up behind McDavid and Draisaitl, Edmonton is going to be a scary team to watch. But that depth hasn't come through the last couple of seasons, which resulted in Edmonton getting eliminated in last year's playoffs to the Blackhawks. With those concerns in mind, that is part of the reason why I am sticking Edmonton in the number 5 spot. All right, so jumping into Montreal. Montreal is going to be one of the teams that is just going to be a young and fun team to watch. Players like Jonathan Drouin, Josh Anderson, Nick Suzuki, Jesperi Kotkaniemi. A lot of those players are going to be a lot of fun to watch. And because of that, Montreal has a great defensive depth as well with Shea Weber, Jeff Petrie, Joel Edmondson, Carey Price and Jake Allen in net, so they do have a 1-2 tandem. I could see Montreal potentially being able to make noise, but again, with the division that they're in, I find it very unlikely that their ability to make it the playoffs is going to happen. And then to wrap out the North Division, of course, would be the Ottawa Senators. With a lot of the moves that Ottawa did make this year, I do expect them to improve. But again, it just comes down to the division that they're in. With the North Division and being in a division with Toronto and Montreal and Vancouver and Calgary, it's just going to be a really tough uphill battle for the Senators. I do think they have the potential to make noise. They have a lot of young prospects. They're going to be another young and fun team to watch. But without that depth that's going to be there, they did add a lot of veterans as well. So, but because of that division and with how good some of those other teams are going to be, I do see Ottawa still kind of struggling this season. And with that said, though, and unfortunately seeing them out of the playoff hunt. So following the North Division, though, we do have the East Division. So the East Division has the Flyers, Bruins, Capitals, Islanders, Penguins, Rangers, Sabres, and Devils. And while I did list those off in the exact order that I have them, we can go ahead and actually kind of break down why I think each team is going to finish where they do. So, in the number one spot, I actually have the Philadelphia Flyers. I think this is something that a lot of people probably don't expect. Carter Hart is going to be the big piece in this. Carter Hart has really shown himself now to be an elite goaltender at the NHL level. I've had the pleasure of getting to watch him play live. He's a very fun and energetic young goalie. The Flyers also have great defensive depth in front of them, so they're going to be keeping the puck out of the net a lot this year. Just the biggest factor for Philadelphia is just going to be if they can stay healthy. They do have a kind of a history with injuries. Nolan Patrick, just to name one. That if Philadelphia cannot stay healthy, I could see them running into a lot of issues this year. But following right behind them is the Boston Bruins. And Boston, one of their strengths is just they're the Boston Bruins. They're a very gritty team. They always have been and always will be. They don't go away easily. And they are going to be, though, without Pastrnak and Marchand to start the season. Both of those players, of course, being away with injury. But as well as the loss of Chara and Krug could potentially end up playing a big role in their defensive depth, which is something that I think they, again, with Boston, they don't go away easily. And they do have Tuukka Rask in net this year as well. So, and Halak is still going to be their backup, so they still have a really great 1-2 tandem. But with a few of those losses that they're going to be having here to start the year, and with a couple of guys that they lost to free agency, I could see Boston potentially sneaking out of that top spot and falling down into second place. Their window's closing, and I think this year is going to be kind of the first year where it really kind of feels like that window is going to be closing for Boston. But following Boston is the Washington Capitals. One of the biggest strengths so far for Washington is going to be their defense. They have a great top six defense, probably one of the best in the league, and you still have Ovi. So offense, I don't think is going to be that much of a concern. Ovi's going to be around. Backstrom's going to be around. Kuznetsov's still going to be around. You still have Tom Wilson on your team. And yeah, with a defensive core as good as Washington's with John Carlson and now the addition is Zdeno Chara, I very well could see Washington being a good a good top 3 team in this division. The only weakness that I really see is while Samsonov has shown himself to be a really good-looking goaltender, he is going to, in a sense, be their only number one. They did bring in Henrik Lundqvist. He's going to miss this season due to heart surgery, so he's out. They lost Braden Holtby to free agency, which has really only left Samsonov as their only number one goalie. That, I think, is going to be just the one factor that I think is going to really hinder Washington from really being the true powerhouse that they were a few years ago. Following up behind them, though, is the New York Islanders, and that, of course, would be the last playoff spot. It was hard to decide between Pittsburgh and the Islanders, but Barry Trotz and his system and his strong defensive system has shown time and time again that they can win with that system. That's how they got to the conference final last year. I don't see any reason, again, why going into this season that they wouldn't be able to execute that system. Their 2.79 goals against per game last year, I believe, was in the top 10 in the NHL. If you're a top 10 team and you can keep the puck out of your net, you're going to win a lot of games. They did bring back Matt Barzal, which is also going to be a really big key for their offense. They've shown that they do have some offensive scoring depth, guys like Josh Bailey as well. But they did lose a couple veterans this year as well. They did just waive Leo Komarov this season. And so the biggest factor, though, that is going to determine if the Islanders make or break in terms of making the playoffs is going to be if their defensive system can hold out. And from what I've seen under Barry Trotz, that system usually does hold out pretty well. Coming in at number 5 is another strong defensive team in the Pittsburgh Penguins. Again, the Pittsburghs, similar to Washington, and even similar to the Islanders as well, have a really great top 6. They have a very young top 6 too now with the addition of John Marino, who they just signed to a huge extension this year or this offseason. But you are starting to see now a lack of depth up front and a lack of depth in goaltending. Tristan Jarry has proven himself last year to be a more than capable number one. So you have no concern there. It's just who is going to follow behind Tristan Jarry that is going to be the question. You lost Matt Murray to Ottawa in a trade. You have lost Marc-Andre Fleury, obviously, in Vegas to the expansion draft a few years ago. So, with Pittsburgh's defense, I think it has the potential to be able to make it. Coach Sullivan is a really great coach over there. But it's how well does their offensive scoring depth hang around. Yes, it's still Crosby, Malkin, and Gensel, but again, how well do the guys behind all that hold out? I think that's going to be the biggest part for Pittsburgh. Behind them is just going to be the New York Rangers. Rangers had a pretty busy offseason. Their most significant signing, of course, being the Alexis Lafreniere signing. They have a lot of young guys up front, even Mika Zibanejad, Kaapo Kakko as well. They are going to be a fun team to watch when it comes to their offensive talent. However, though, with so much young talent up front, it's how well does that young talent play at such a high level. And then as well as the fact that their defense allows a lot of shots. They were down towards the bottom of the league last year in terms of, or kind of high in the league in terms of shots allowed per game. And they do have Shesterkin in net, so again, I do think they have a very capable, and as well as Georgiev as well. So they do have a pretty solid 1-2 young tandem. I don't think there's going to be too much concern there. It's just going to be if their defense can limit the number of shots that those goalies see. I believe that the Rangers are going to have a decent year, but with just the other teams in the division, it's going to be very hard for them to fight for that playoff spot. And behind them is going to be the Buffalo Sabres. Buffalo added a lot of depth this offseason with the addition of Jordan Staal. or Eric Stahl, sorry, as well as the addition of Taylor Hall being the really significant one on his 1-year deal. But with a lot of that added depth to kind of support Jack Eichel, they are still struggling in the special teams department as of last season. If Buffalo can have a good turnaround with bringing in a new coach this year as well, we'll see how that plays into how they run their special teams. If it can turn their special teams around, I do think Buffalo has a really good shot at being able to make the play, or being able to at least put up a good fight in this division. If Buffalo can get off to the starts that they have had in years past, I could see them potentially even making a good run for a potential playoff spot, but it's going to come down to consistency, and if Buffalo cannot maintain a consistent pace with that, I do not see them really making the playoffs. And then, of course, to round out the division would be the New Jersey Devils. They did bring in Corey Crawford on a 2-year, $6 million deal, and he just retired from hockey after 2 days in training camp. So they did add some depth, and if Jack Hughes can have a good comeback year after seeming a pretty kind of a rough first year in New Jersey, I do think that they will be, again, another kind of fun team to watch this year. But New Jersey last year had a really hard time being able to score 5-on-5. And they do seem to have a lot of a lack of depth apart from kind of that top line. If, with those factors in mind, it's going to be really difficult to kind of see how New Jersey is going to be able to contend in a division that still is going to have teams like Philly and Boston and Washington. And so that's going to kind of wrap up the division previews for today. And that's all I had on the agenda for today. So we will be back again tomorrow. Appreciate you all for watching. Be sure to, if you're new and you like what you hear, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Also hit the like button as well, just so it's help me know that you guys enjoy the content. And if you guys have any suggestions and want to hear your own, feel free to post your own opinion down in the comment section below. Be sure to also share this video as well with anyone who you think might enjoy a quick little season preview. And I will talk to you guys all soon. Bye.